Malawi and Zimbabwe got their AFCON 2017 qualification campaigns underway at the Kamuzu Stadium in Blantyre on Saturday afternoon. The home side started well and went close in the 13th minute with a drive from range that flashed past the post. But they were caught out midway through the half as Zimbabwe took the lead.
Now a mistake and a chance for Zimbabwe to punish, and Marijila takes advantage.
The advantage lasted barely a minute though, with Malawi restoring parity within seconds.
John Banda, 2 goals in a week, and the Flames are level pegging.
The hosts had a number of opportunities to complete the turnaround in the first half, but 1-1 was how the first 45 would end. A draw appeared in the offing as the match meandered to a close until a moment of magic from Khama Billiat decided the contest.
And Billiat has scored a marvellous goal. He can't believe it himself.
Whether intentional or not, Billiat's wonder goal proved the difference between the sides as Zimbabwe made the perfect start to their qualifying campaign.
Having missed out on qualification for this year's finals in Equatorial Guinea, Nigeria's quest for African redemption began with their first Group G qualifier for the 2017 AFCON finals against Chad on Saturday. The Super Eagles were the first to seriously threaten after the half hour as Gabulahan Salami had his effort well saved by Dila Mabaira-Maji. Having never qualified for the African Cup of Nations before, Chad gave the home side a major scare, but Victor Nyema did brilliantly to keep the scores level. After the break, Aaron Samuel came close to breaking the deadlock, but it did not take long for Stephen Keshi's team to seize the advantage.
An opportunity for Nigeria, and what a strike that was! Bola Salami, it was almost always going to be him. That was struck with real venom.
Osama Aselmo pulled down Odion Igalo with 12 minutes left, which gave the Watford-based striker the chance to double the lead. In the lead-up to the spot kick, though, Ogeni Onazi took exception to Aselmo's challenge and was given his marching orders for his retaliation. When things settled down, Igalo took care of business with ease to guarantee an opening qualifying win for the 3-time African champions. Just 3 years ago, Zambia were champions of Africa. But that status is long gone, and the Chipolo Polo hosted a side who have never played in the African Football Showpiece Tournament, Guinea-Bissau, as they began their AFCON 2017 Group E qualifiers. Clear-cut chances were hard to come by in the opening 45 minutes, with neither side able to assert their authority. Zambia, though, may well have taken the lead when Renford Kalaba evaded defensive attentions at the back post, only to miss the target. Well into the second half, home captain Kalaba was again denied, but this time it was by some quick-thinking defending. Visiting keeper Jonas Mendes was called into proper action for the first time in the match not long after, but he was up to the task. With the final whistle closing in, controversy struck as Eridsson headed the ball onto his own hand in the area, setting up a chance for George Luwandamina's side to win the match.
Winner takes his time. Mendes saves. Not the greatest of penalties, to be perfectly honest. Mendes saves again. Well, that wasn't too clever, was it?
Those two missed opportunities allowed Paulo Torres' team to sneak a point from their far superior opponents.
We're live back here on Football 360. We're live every Sunday evening from 8 o'clock till 9 o'clock. Here we talk football in 60 minutes. Tonight we'll be talking about football in terms of the local scene. There'll be stuff on Kotoko as their abysmal season continues. The question is whether how long would Coach Duncan continue to hold to that position. We'll talk a lot more about that a bit later on in the show. And there's a big story during the week where government issued a white paper in terms of that report by the Commission of Jamafe Commission. So we'll talk a lot more about that. We'll also talk about the Black Satellites under 20 team exiting the World Youth Tournament during the week. They were beaten by Mali 3-0. And the big story in terms of the transfer market, which is of concern to the Ghanaian public, is definitely the fact that Dede Ayew has made the move to Swansea in the English Premiership. It was a big one during the week as he becomes arguably the highest paid player on the payroll of Swansea. We'll talk a lot more about that live right here on your Football 360. Quickly, we'll touch base on that 20 tournament. We'll come back a bit later on to the qualifying series across the African continent. It's been quite big and huge results. Like Ghanaians themselves were on a rampage, winning 7 goals to 1 this evening, and also the likes of Tunisia also winning 8 goals to 0. We've got all that happening right here on your Football 360. Joining me on the show is Veronica Commey of Ghana News Agency. Thanks a lot for coming through.
Thank you, Nancy.
It's been a while?
Yes.
I've been running around. Globetrotting?
Yeah, a bit.
You're welcome back.
Thank you.
We're glad you're back in one piece.
Happy to be here.
Happy to have you all the time. But quickly, before we go into in terms of the highlights of the Under-20 tournament, Ghana exiting at the very early stage of the competition, and I thought immediately we drew the Malians. We thought it was tricky, but just didn't expect that they would beat us convincingly like that, 3 goals to 0.
There is this big joke in town that it's always tricky when you meet your age mates. I think that for international tournaments, it's always difficult when you come across the Africans, especially if they are as good as the Malians. I remember being with a team in Dakar for the African Youth Championship, playing Mali in the first round. At the group stage, they beat us 1-0. There was one thing defining about the Malian team. They were tall, they were skillful. They had something I hadn't seen of the Malians, even at a senior level in a while. And I always thought that they would be in the finals, even at the African Youth Championship. And the Black Satellites, you could talk about individual players, which would lead you to Clifford Abuaje. He was 3rd best at the last competition.
We keep on mentioning that. We never stop mentioning it.
Obviously, sometimes if you don't have too many references, the one you have may look a bit too spoken of, but truly we don't have a choice. But we went into this competition and there were a few things I expected from exactly what they did in Dakar. In Dakar, I realized that during the competition, they were still working with a physical trainer, which left a lot of the boys tired. It had to be before the tournament, which they did before going into New Zealand. Once they beat Argentina, it was fair to begin to really believe that, okay, Argentina came into the competition, South American champions, they have pedigree, 6 times world champions, they had played 19 games, hadn't lost one, so it was always going to be difficult. Then you proved to be good enough, and I thought it was the moment the team began becoming complacent, because after the game it was important for Silas Ete to be really confident, but you could almost see the attitude that said that after beating Argentina, we are going all the way to the finals. I still wanted to hear a game at a time. And against Mali, we were outclassed, we were outplayed, we were out everything in the game. It appeared we lacked creativity, we quite didn't know what we wanted. 2 shots on target for an entire duration. I don't think it was very good. And if today you have seen how Mali handled Germany, came back 4th, 1-1, beat them 5-4 on penalties. And this is a German side, like many German sides, that are always really good with penalties. And for Mali to have gone, that it tells you that really
the kind of team
it was always going to be Mali going really forward.
Going ahead. So we've got the highlights of that particular game. As Veronica said, we're virtually outclassed. We're beaten convincingly in that particular game. The Ghanaians lost 3 goals to 0 in the second round of the Under-20 tournament. We're back with live here on Football 360. It's live every Sunday evening from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock. We talk about football in 60 minutes. It's kindly proud to be associated with DSTV Super Sports, your world of champions. By their kind courtesy, you see most of the highlights right here on your Football 360. Just going by is under 20 U tournament that is happening in New Zealand. Ghana got kicked out in the second round. We were beaten by African counterpart Mali in that particular game. 3-0. Were beaten convincingly, but for the Malians, you've got to give them all the credit. They beat the Germans this evening, and it's important for us to touch base on that. And for once, you've got to remember that you always find the Ghanaians and the Nigerians doing well at this particular stage of FIFA competitions, but to find some other country apart from Nigeria or Ghana performing this well, we've got to give credit to the Malians. And we're joined by Thierry Nyann, your host of Sports Section, Varsat 1. Thank you very much for joining us.
Same to you. Pleasure.
Okay. Like I was just saying, what's different about this Mali team? I mean, this Malian team, I'm very quite expatiated on the fact that they looked way better than us. They were more skillful. He's never seen something like that when it comes to a Malian team. What's been different about this team?
I would first of all touch on the goals they scored, and that would be the start of the discussion. When you look at the kind of goals that they actually put in, in Ghana's net, all 3 goals were quality goals. I mean, one Kela, another was as a result of a very good team effort. A good goal. One that was very reminiscent of an Arsenal or a Barcelona kind of football. Then you're looking at how efficient they were on the day. I thought they were hungrier on that particular day. When you look at how the Black Satellites played, they thought, we've beaten Argentina. You see, that is something that we need to correct, on our shores. When you do away with teams like Argentina, it doesn't mean that you can beat the Minus, like Mali presented themselves to be. When a Malian side, like what we faced, in that particular quarter-final game, or should I say, was it round 16?
Well, second
round 16 game. That game, was supposed to, keep us on our toes rather than get us complacent. We're supposed to know that this was a game that was actually, going to tell us exactly how far we've come, as an African, force. I think that when the Black Satellites would always come up against the South Americans and the Europeans, they would always be hungrier, they would always be more determined, wanting to prove a point. But when they come up against the Africans, apart from the brute force, the sheer brute force that the other African opponents would impose on our players, I think that one of the reasons why we don't really get results against them is the fact that we get complacent. We think we have beaten the Brazilians before, we've beaten the Argentines before, we can beat the Malians. And that is something that can be corrected by the technical team and the psychologists.
So between the two of you, there's one underlying factor. That's the fact that we're quite complacent going to the game against Mali.
We were, because we beat Mali to get bronze at African Youth Championship. On that day, there was one.
But they had beaten us earlier in the group.
But it was 1-0. They beat us. Then we beat them 3-1. I thought that, like many teams, it's about how motivated you are when it comes to bronze. Because Mali walked into the tournament, all of us knew that they had to qualify for the finals. Somehow they didn't. I'm sure they were disappointed, and they were only happy to have qualified for the World Cup, and they didn't motivate themselves really for the bronze compared to just how much we wanted it. And on the day, it kept telling. What I thought we should have learned was really how it all panned out in the first game at the group stage, and how good Mali had been, even though we still beat them in the last meeting to get a bronze. And I think we didn't learn it. You look at this Mali team, and one thing was obvious: they had studied our team. They knew how to pick it apart. They knew how to attack at will. They knew who would try to dribble and over dribble. And every time, despite the fact that they were taller than us, they just didn't play it all in the air. They kept it on the ground. And surprisingly, we played exactly the way we did against them when we lost that 1-0. So I think that beyond us being complacent, we were not really hungry on the day.
Not hungry, but so what? So you've mentioned two words that it's a bit difficult to lay the blame on the doorstep of anybody. But again, it's important for somebody to take a responsibility for a tournament that we had high hopes to perform.
At least the coach is taking responsibility. Salasata says
he had to be.
Yeah, he let us know.
You know, I think again he was being the classic, you know, under-20 coach anywhere around the world. If you have a very young team you are actually coaching or guiding, when they make mistakes, you, the leader, would have to sometimes accept responsibility. You may not necessarily lay the blame on their doorstep because you know they have not really learned enough, you know, in their career or in their respective careers, you know, to be able to, you know, take a lot of. I mean, if
except that if you are playing against your peers, you don't really need to be in the category.
That's one of the learning factor.
A huge senior
You're playing
player
against peers that you don't know anything about. You see, when I'm coming up against a Lionel Messi or a Carlos Tevez, I know how to map up a strategy because I've watched him over and over again. These are the 20 sides that you barely don't know anything about.
No. But they knew the Malians.
Yeah,
that was the third time they were playing the Malians.
Exactly, but let's not forget,
in 2 months,
the starting lineup in that African Youth Championship had 4 changes, 4 drastic changes to to the team we met, of course, at the World Cup.
No, but it's...
And let's not kid ourselves. One change can make a big difference.
But we also had 3 changes to the game.
Exactly what I'm saying. So it could swing in favor of any team.
But it would be unfair to say that they don't know that they do not know their Malian team.
I think it's fair.
It's not fair.
No, I think it's fair.
Them the third time.
We knew Dumbia.
You see, exactly. Did you know Argentina? Before you came up against Argentina.
Yeah, so you didn't know Argentina.
Exactly.
That's fine.
And the results went for you. So it could swing it that way.
Mali that much, and
so that's what we are saying. In terms of knowing, if there's any other team we knew, in terms of the teams we are playing,
it should be an advantage.
It should be Mali.
You see, like we've already said, apart from the fact that you think that you know this team, they have something you don't have. They are hungrier than you were.
So that's it. So that can be understandable. Sure. That's which we've all alluded to the fact that they were hungrier, we were complacent in the game, but at the same time we knew the Malians, we knew what they were capable of, and I think probably technically we're bankrupt on the day.
We were poor on that day.
Well, I will accept that.
Okay.
I will accept that.
So quickly, we'll have to go for our first commercial break. When we do come back, we'll focus the discussions on the senior national team, the Black Stars. They were on rampage this afternoon. We've got to give them credit. We actually beat them quite hard when they lose games like what they've lost in the past. So when they beat Mauritius 7-1, we've got to give them all the credit. We're back to talk a lot more about that. And GFA will also be on center stage this evening. We're back in a moment.